that he would fail. And he is failing. It's been almost 4 weeks now. And they're desperately trying to advance into Lebanon. And they're taking huge casualties, including this morning. Hezbollah is really hitting them hard. But now I'm beginning to think that maybe Netanyahu did think that he could just roll over or go right over Hezbollah and finish the job. Hezbollah is, and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah is the pillar of resistance in that part of the world. But he trained generations of people, and he helped young people in Hamas, in Hezbollah, in Islamic Jihad, and elsewhere in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, to become a part of the resistance, to become prepared for war. But they are, these different resistance groups are sophisticated organizations now with highly motivated and highly intelligent and highly educated people involved. So Yahya Sinwar or Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, or now the commanders that are fighting in the field, who will obviously be facing martyrdom in the days and weeks ahead, or the martyr Sayyid Hashim Safiuddin. All of these people, they're going to be more and more martyrs and casualties. But Israel is not going to win the war. It's doing the exact opposite. It is mobilizing public opinion in favor of the resistance group and of the different resistance groups. So imagine what the mood is now in Jordan, despite the existence of a police state. Imagine what the mood is in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, even in a country like Turkey, which is much more, public opinion is acknowledged to a greater degree through democracy. Imagine the mood right now as the Israelis murder these leaders. Yahya Sinwar, is he the Yahya Sinwar of 2 weeks ago? No. Is Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah he's not what he was before. He's much larger. But they can't see this, and they're going to pay the price. Hezbollah, as I may said on your show before, Hezbollah has not lost any of its military capability, because Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah has spent 20 years in developing this underground network across the country.
Live streaming is more than just a trend. It's a way to connect, share, and inspire. But setting up a professional, high-quality live stream is not easy at all.
So we're seeing them firing heavy missiles at Israel from those underground bases. We see that from those underground tunnels, they're attacking Israeli tanks and Israeli infantry. The infantry now, they've been losing so many tanks that now they're not using their tanks. Over the last couple of days, they've been sending in more infantry, but they're still taking heavy losses. So Hezbollah has been fully prepared. Yes, the Israeli regime, in their initial airstrikes, they were able to take out leaders, which is not extraordinary because they had 2 decades to gather intelligence, Western embassies, AWACS planes, drones flying alongside the Mediterranean, the Five Eyes, Western NGOs in Beirut. They've been active, so they could find some places under Beirut, especially a place like Beirut, which is by the sea, and the tunnels there are different from the tunnels that are under mountains and across the country. So yes, Beirut was always going to be their weakest link, but now their commanders are well protected, their leaders are well protected, they're in fighting mode, and the Israelis have a very painful battle to fight in the days and weeks ahead. But I think that, going back to your question, I think that they don't understand our region. The Israeli regime and any racist, it's like the Israeli regime is like the slave owners of the American South, who underestimate their slaves, who see them as inferior, and then they are, when the time comes, they're always shocked and surprised.
If you remember, before October 7, everybody, whenever they were talking in the West, they were talking about Israel. Israel is so powerful in terms of intelligence, in terms of military, and the picture they were giving us about Israel. And right now, after a year in this conflict in the Middle East, how do you see the capabilities of Israel in terms of intelligence, in terms of military? We saw that 2 Iranian attacks on Israel, they were incapable of shooting down the main missiles that they could hit the targets in Israel. Right now, Hezbollah is attacking by drones Prime Minister's house in Israel. How do you see this? Because whenever they're talking in Israel, the Netanyahu administration, he's talking about our security is our priority. what has happened to Israel's security in their eyes, in your opinion?
Well, one thing that I'd like to add first is that when the leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, went to Friday prayers, that was at a time when there were lots of rumors that the Israeli regime was going to strike. And Western media was putting out this fake information that they removed, that he was taken from his office or his place of residence and taken elsewhere, and that sort of nonsense. And so he went to the Friday prayers. He went earlier because they had a ceremony for the martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. Then he said the Friday prayers, and afterwards he stayed there and met people. And there was an unprecedented crowd in Tehran for those Friday prayers because people felt that there was a threat, because people thought that there may be airstrikes or drone strikes or missile strikes on Tehran. So this is something that the Israeli regime, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. They simply do not comprehend the region. They do not comprehend Iran. They do not comprehend Hezbollah. They do not comprehend Hamas. They don't understand Ansarullah in Yemen or Islamic Jihad or the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces. They can't comprehend them because their assessment is based upon ethno-supremacism. And since the West has, as I said earlier, this Eurocentric and an exceptionalist worldview, they are all their analysis, their views, their analyses on the region, they're compatible with one another. And so they're always going to get it wrong. They're always going to miscalculate. So that's one issue. The second is that first we have to remember that the Israeli regime, as we are speaking, is fighting with American weapons, European weapons, American ammunition, European ammunition, American assistance, European assistance, American intelligence, European intelligence. They're not fighting this war by themselves. The heavy lifting, despite all this, going back to the issue of the missile strikes, the Iranian missile strikes, even then, the heavy lifting was being done by the Americans, directly by the Americans, the American naval ships and the American Air Force or the American air power. Despite all that, the regime is floundering. Again, over a year in Gaza, have they been able to take any part of Gaza? Right now, they're imposing starvation in the north, as we all know, with Western support. Have no doubt that Western media, if they wanted to stop this, Western media could stop it. They would be screaming about genocide day and night. If they just did that for 3-4 days, it would stop. Just Western media. If the BBC and CNN, forget Fox News and The Guardian and everyone, if just the BBC and CNN focus on the Holocaust in northern Gaza, the starvation siege, and the constant bombing and massacres that are taking place just in northern Gaza for 3-4 days, they back down. Have no doubt. So the West and the Israelis are imposing a starvation siege. They've slaughtered, who knows, maybe 200,000 people directly and indirectly. Who knows how many people are under the rubble and have not been counted? Who knows how many people have died of cancer and illness and who've died because there's no medicine? Who knows?
A parade of people have had encounters with the Galactic Federation.
They've succeeded in carrying out a genocide, but they have not been able to take Gaza. And this is after a full year. This is the same Israeli regime that would go all the way to the Suez Canal once upon a time, that would go all the way to Beirut and take the city once upon a time, that went and took the Golan and the West Bank. Now they cannot take Gaza. Now, on the border with Lebanon, they have tens of thousands of forces trying to penetrate into Lebanon, and they're facing heavy casualties, despite overwhelming air power, because Hezbollah has over decades created a sophisticated underground capability across Lebanon, especially southern and central Lebanon. So I think that the Israeli regime has definitely been diminished in the eyes of the world. Its military capabilities, I think, have been exposed. Its intelligence capabilities have been exposed. All of them as being exaggerated, and they are just desperately clinging on to Western support to continue these mass murders. I mean, I've lived in Beirut. They bomb banks. They know those banks they contain the money of the people. They want to impoverish people, especially they're focusing on the supporters of the resistance, the communities that support the resistance. They want to impoverish. They're bombing apartment blocks, not because there's anyone in them, because they want to destroy people's houses. They want to destroy shops. They want to make them impoverished, permanently. They want to destroy society, just like what they're doing in Gaza. And the West is completely supportive of this. Western journalists are in Beirut, many of them. There are a few good people among them, a few, yeah, very few. But most of them, overwhelmingly, they know what's going on, but that's not how they're going to report it. They're going to say these are Hezbollah strongholds, Hezbollah targets. They know they're just targeting houses. Every time you see a heavy strike on Beirut or on other cities in Lebanon, you can be certain that they suffered a major blow on the border. Hezbollah killed a number of their soldiers. They go and take it out on the people. So whenever you see a huge wave of airstrikes on Beirut, you can be sure that something bad happened on the border. And this is what Western journalists know, because they know enough about Beirut, those who are there, to know that these are not military targets that are being destroyed. They know that, but they work for corporate media. They work for legacy media, and legacy media is never going to stand against the Israeli regime. But the fact is that people who watch the scenes, ordinary people, they're not stupid. When they see a huge apartment tower just come down, there's no way that anyone is going to be able to justify it by saying they have gold underneath, or the nonsense that the Israelis have been saying about the hospitals now. It's so outrageous that a couple of Western journalists, Hezbollah took them, or the resistance took them to see those hospitals so that they would, as I said, maybe there are a few journalists who are decent or half decent. So people across the world are seeing this. Israel is despised across the world. Is that a victory? When if tomorrow an Israeli wants to travel to China and says, I'm an Israeli tourist, do you think people, when people look down upon them and look at them with disgust, that that's not going to have an impact on the future of Israel, on the future on how they identify themselves, and perhaps where they choose to live in future? So the regime has been diminished completely, and its image has been shattered, both as a capable military, but also as a so-called liberal democracy, whatever that means, because the whole West is involved in this genocide. And whether they like it or not, today Iran, the country which is the most antagonized in the world, is looked upon favorably across the global South, or the global majority, as some say. Hezbollah, Hamas, the resistance, Ansarullah, they're seen in a very different light across the region and beyond. And the West, it's seen as an accomplice to this genocide. So everything has changed in this year. Everything has changed. And I think this, when we look at what's happening in Kazan and the BRICS summit, this has an impact on that, because it only acts as a catalyst for the rest of the world who wants to have less to do with the West, who wants to be less dependent on the West, who wants to be less reliant on the West, because they see the West as not the civilized world. They see the West as the biggest threat to the civilized world.
Yeah, as recently we had the U.S. envoy Hochstein to Lebanon talking with military and political figures. On the other hand, Antony Blinken was in Israel talking with Netanyahu. Do you think, when you look at the Biden administration right now and the way that they're trying to implement their policy in that region, do you think that they're trying to manage the situation? Are they trying to convince Lebanese, make some sort of fracture, make some sort of division within Lebanon? Because they're still hoping that this division would benefit Israel in the long term.
The show you're currently watching or listening to is on YouTube. It's available every time we do a show on youtube.com/StuDoesAmerica. We've got this show, we've got comedy bits, a new one coming this week that might be a little edgy. A little scared of it, but you're going to see it anyway later this week. And we also do live news reaction if you were with us this weekend. You may